foes. Welcome to Art Book Club. My name is Stephanie Scott. I've got Visual Nomad or Jennifer here on Twitch. We are talking about curating art now, and that's our book today. We also have a little mascot. She's chewing on a bone right now, but she will be in my lap at some point saying hi to all of you. Her name's Elsa. She's 5 pounds of fluff. She doesn't know a lot about art because she's a puppy, and but she's very enthusiastic. So that's our special guest today. I guess we should start with my very first question, which is always the first question. Did you finish this book?
I did.
Wow. Nice. I got 75% of the way through it.
Okay.
Yeah. What are your overall thoughts at first? Do we like it? Do we not like it?
I think it's good. Like I think it like for me it kind of uncovers I think some of the issues in the art world that like you and I have talked about in passing for sure.
Right.
And kind of goes into a bit more depth about them on a level that I don't naturally get to interact with just because I'm not a curator. I don't run in those circles, so I don't know. So it's kind of interesting to hear the dynamics that go on there, you know, be it a biennale, an actual like government museum or a private gallery or museum. How curation happens with that. So
nice. Yeah, I didn't like the first half of the book, and I think that's why I struggled to get into it. I feel like right now I'm at the best part of the book where I'm just like, this is so interesting and I'm learning something new. But I feel like I said this to a friend the other day. I was like, this feels like reading a podcast script. Like it's a lot of facts about things I already know or could just generally assume. And I'm like, I wish I started halfway through, because now I'm like, okay, we're getting into topics like how COVID changed curation digitally and things like that. I'm like, this is what I want to know about. So I'm a little bit bummed at myself actually for not finishing this one in time. Which is a first time for me because usually I'm just like, whatever, I don't finish it. It's fine. But this one I'm like, oh, I should have pushed through earlier at the beginning. Oh, I'm definitely going to finish it.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes if something has a really dry beginning and you have to like, it hurts a bit to get through it. I mean, that's just with any book. Yeah. So my enthusiasm was a little bit waned there, but I have been liking this book, and I think it holds up in the series so far. This is the second book in Hot Topics in the Art World that we've read for Brushwork Podcast here, and I'm liking it. I'm liking it. What was your favorite chapter or the most interesting chapter that you liked? Or want to talk about?
Let me see here. I had something highlighted here. Let's see if I can find it. I didn't write down the page number. I should have.
I actually bought this book instead of borrowing it from the library, and I'm able to like highlight things, and now I have notes, and it's so convenient. I'm like, is this what it's like when you spend money on books? Wow.
See, that's why I like ebooks, because like you can just pull them up on a Kindle.
So nice.
And you can highlight things and like go back through. Sorry, this is taking forever.
Listener, are you an ebook person? Or are you an audiobook person, or are you a physical book person? You should tell us in the comments.
Like the concept of a star curator, like somebody that if they curate a show, people go to see that. Like,
yeah,
I don't know that I really knew that there were people at that level, where it was like they had created such a name for themselves as a curator that, you know, people flocked to whatever they put together.
Same.
I could understand like the artist curator shows, you know, like Yeo Kozuma, like her shows are huge. Like she curates her own shows, their rooms, they're, you know, they're crazy. Like she takes over the museum essentially and does the thing. But she's the artist that's being shown. So like I could understand that being more of a draw for people than like somebody that is the director of MoMA. Like the only thing I can think that they're famous for is like, I want to get my piece in the MoMA. I need to know who you are. I need to
Right.
talk to you. I need to network with you,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Not your ability to curate a show.
I
Yeah.
have also never heard of well, I guess I just never paid attention to a celebrity curator before. A lot of the names that were dropped in this book, I was like, I don't actually know who these people are.
Right.
And it kind of feels to me in the same way celebrity chefs are, where it's just like, this feels a little odd that it's,
yeah.
I mean, I guess when you are in a world that is so political, I'm going to say, as the art world, you're going to get famous when you're that well connected.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's yeah, it just feels odd. I'm like, a famous curator. I don't know. Like, would I recognize them on the street? Like, like what is that? Would I hire someone just because they were famous at curating? I guess that's also one of the points in the book here, where it's just like, what makes a good curator? Is it their past experience, or is it their individuality of, you know, their backgrounds and stuff like that? And what makes for someone who's good at putting together a show of artwork, especially in a museum? And
yeah.
It's wild. It's wild. Have you ever thought about curating your own show? Maybe not of your work, but what would that look like?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think it would be more of an installation type situation. I think the shows that have struck me the most have been the ones where it's gone beyond just a bunch of pieces hanging on a wall.
Yeah.
The one that really sticks out in my mind is an exhibit that was in Chicago. It was Van Gogh, Gauguin, and Cezanne, I think.
I think they came to Seattle too.
And it had the letters between Van Gogh and his brother Theo. And they juxtaposed them with the pieces. So time frame wise, like they would have the piece and it'd be like, and this is where he wrote about, you know, his day during, you know, painting that piece or whatever, or what was going on around that time in his life. And then they had a mock-up of the Yellow House that he's famous for painting from.
Oh, that's so cool.
And you could go in it and look around and stuff.
Really?
But yeah, it was really cool. Like I think it was to scale because it's not a big place. Like it's just a little French apartment, so it's not massive or anything. So they could fit it in the museum. And yeah, just those are the ones that like strike me the most. Like I've been to an exhibit where they had Dale Chihuly's work in a botanical garden. Like they do shows at this botanical garden all the time. Like they change seasonally.
Oh, cool.
So they have like Halloween, Christmas, that kind of thing. But he came in and he did his glass sculpture installations all over the property. And it was super cool because like he created some of them on site to fit that place. Like he brings some of his own, like his previous work, and then he always does work on site so that it kind of fits in. And like those are the things that I always find like super interesting and really cool type of installations that I think get people excited, you know, because it engages them and, you know, gets them, you know, wondering and thinking, and it takes all of who they are mentally, physically to get involved in something like that, where you're walking around a property and you're seeing that. You're reading things that they've put out so that you can kind of understand the sculptures and the concepts and everything. But that's fun. I would love to have something like that where, you know, you create this immersive experience for sure.
I also feel that installations are most notable in my memory. I feel like whenever I go to an exhibit, it's single paintings that stand out to me when it's like, like recently, or I guess last year, there was this exhibit at the Seattle Art Museum of paintings from this one beach in France, whose name I cannot remember, but we'll link in the show notes. And it's where a lot of artists have gone to paint. And so it was just an exhibit of all these paintings from, you know, a century of artists going here and how the space has changed. And I remember mostly 2 or 3 paintings that I was just like, this is such a gorgeous painting. But the exhibit as a whole, I'm like, has an interesting topic, but I don't remember the majority of it, but I do remember you know, those few paintings. But when I go to an installation and it's like, it like consumes you almost, right? When you go into it, that's where I'm just like, who put this together? This is so cool. And isn't that interesting as visual artists to think that way? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to London 4.5 years ago, and there was a Shahuli exhibit at Kew Gardens, which is this huge botanical gardens. And so when you were describing that to me, I was like, oh, that must be a very similar thing as to what you witnessed. I'm like, it was extremely cool seeing all these like glass spires in also these towers of cacti and palm trees and whatever in this beautiful glass building. And yeah, that is just a knockout idea. And I'm like, who did curate that? I guess before reading this book, it's never popped up into my mind to be like, who is the curator? And maybe that's the point of curation. Maybe that's when it's done well. You don't think about who put it together, but what you're experiencing.
Yeah, it kind of removes them from the picture, and it just kind of introduces the conversation to the viewer, be it between, you know, multiple artists or the conversation with a single artist to the viewer, you know? Yeah. Or more of a facilitator, so to speak, in that respect.
This book is... I haven't, of course, I haven't finished it, but I am recommending this book to any sort of artist. I think this book is definitely directed at visual artists, maybe not people who are already in the curation field or students of curatorship, but it's the same way as when you start learning how to put this is a funny comparison, but it's like when you start making YouTube videos, you start looking at YouTube videos differently. And when you read a book like this, you're going to start looking at exhibitions differently from the person making it versus being the main audience. And that's kind of fun for when you are an artist yourself, you're producing your own visual work here. It's
sure.
In this book, we go through a couple topics of, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a majority of the topics here is, one, how to become a curator and what that process is like and how that's changed over the years. And I feel like it's not a super popular field. They talk about a couple of statistics where it's like there's a couple of programs that are really well known for teaching curatorship well, and they have high application rates and very small acceptance rates, but the high is like 800 people a year applied to these things, and I'm like, that's high, but that's also like a tiny percentage of people who want to be a curator. But then it also talks about how now with the internet, I feel like every book reader is like, well, let's talk about the internet now. It's that you can become a curator in your own right in a much more casual way than what used to be.
Sure.
Have you ever applied to online group shows that are like only online?
I have. I've not gotten into any of them, but I did. Yeah.
I've applied to a couple. I got into like one, and usually they're like $10 to enter, something like that. They're very tiny. And, you know, there's definitely one person who's curating it, and they choose who gets to be in this online exhibition. And I've only done this like once or twice, and then been like, these aren't for me. These don't actually do anything. Because I feel like nobody is like, oh, I want to see this online exhibition. And I'm going to go to this person's website, and I'm just going to scroll through all of their, let's say they're like blue paintings. Right. Hey, thanks for the follow. And it's strange. You curate your own experience online. You curate what you're putting out online in them. And it's interesting to think. What are your opinions on curating your own? Well, okay, those are two questions. Curating your own, I guess, presentation of your work versus what are your experiences in curating what is presented to you? Is that a clear enough question?
So how I would curate my own as opposed to how I like to experience it from somebody else?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think curating your own is very, very different in the respect of you've poured yourself into that, at least as an artist curator. I would think that, it would be hard not to be more involved in a self-curated as opposed to something that somebody else has curated. It's a topic that you may be interested in or whatever, but it's through somebody else's lens. One thing I will say about self-curated stuff, I think it works in the context of something like, I follow an artist that's named Sophie T. She's very well known over in London, Australia. She's had her stuff in some pretty well-known galleries around the world. And I think she's very social media heavy. She's always posting about what's going on in her studio, day-to-day life, that kind of thing. I think that a self-curated show by somebody like that already has a heavy fan base that expects stuff online from that artist.
Yeah.
And that moves in a digital space. She has a whole NFT gallery in her gallery space. It's just NFTs upstairs.
That's cool.
And so she's she's doing some really cutting edge art stuff. Like she's doing stuff with like Oculus goggles and that kind of thing. She's creating art that way. She's creating 3D digital art that way. But yeah, I think it works in that context because you already have a built-in fan base. Like if it's somebody like me, I don't have the following to be able to pull for that. Like it wouldn't be beneficial for me. Like you said, when you applied to that one show, you didn't feel like it was beneficial because who knows this person that's curating?
Right.
And how many people know you? And is that enough to, like make it worth your time to do an event like that, where you are, unless it's a passion project where you're just like, I'm just going to update this every so often. It doesn't matter if somebody sees it or not. This is something that I'm passionate about and I love doing. And if somebody sees it, they see it, then, I can understand that too. But
I guess in that sense, you have to have a built up reputation, and that artist you talked about has a huge strategy and lots and lots of work went behind that. And it was very careful, probably. It didn't happen on accident. And when you have a little gallery that does an online exhibition, it's like, okay, what's the reputation of the curator? So in that sense, a celebrity curator makes sense. It's like, oh, they're known for doing these things and applauded for it even. So that's
right.
It's fascinating.
Like if it was somebody like Ai Weiwei that curated an exhibit, people know who that is. Even if it wasn't of their work, it was, oh, these are, pieces that have inspired me, or, they picked a topic to pull from. And, it was things that struck them in that sphere of things. then I could understand that too. Yeah, like you have, like with social media, you have to have that base of viewership
Mm-hmm.
for it to really do be have the same effect as it would in a like a brick and mortar situation.
Yeah. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we had to show the tiny dog for a second. Oh my gosh, yes. What do you hear? Do you hear the neighbors? um, yeah. How do you curate your own online experience? What do you do to make that worthwhile? Okay, so like I have the thought in reading the last chapter I got to, which was 6 or something like that, where okay, oh no, where did it go? Come back to my brain. How do you curate your own online experience? Right. So in order to get into the art world, an easy way now is to make connections with other artists online. And in order to get a good feed on what's happening in the art world, you have to actively follow the correct people, correct, quote unquote, the correct people that lead you towards your goals, right? And now I'm wondering, how do you curate your online experience to reach your goals? Do you have any like things that you actively do?
Some of it is so I read the tweets and stuff from art forums, a few different art publications, so then I kind of get an idea of what's going on in the overall art world.
Yeah.
You know, they'll touch on, you know, art theft, you know, hot topics of the time, which one of those falls into this, which is where they are sending artworks back to their origin and how that affects curation and whatnot. And I mean, as far as like Instagram and stuff, I'm recommended people by my friends like you and Cassidy and some other people that I know that are artists. And so I follow that and I pull stuff from there too. Like if those people are like, hey, check this out, then, you know, and I'm kind of picky about things. Like I'm not so quick to follow things. I don't want to clutter my feed with a bunch of just like, I love art and that's great, but I need it to be strategic in some respects because of how I'm trying to filter things that I use or that inspire me or educate me on what's going on. So I'm kind of picky about those things.
I got this advice from a teacher maybe 6 years ago when Instagram was really taking off, and she's like, and it had just been to the point where you could make more than one profile and easily switch between them. And she told me and my other students, she's like, you have to curate your own experience online, and a really good way to do that is to make a separate profile, not just for your art business, but for that too, and follow very specific people and keep it as pure, quote unquote, as you can.
Sure.
You're not, if you see something on that feed and you've been following artists and artists and artists, and then it's like, you should read this book, and it's like fantasy or something, like, don't interact with it. Like, really be careful about who you're following. And that will, it will change what you see and how you are interacting with the larger art world in general. And I've been growing this one account that I use just for following artists, and it's been very nice to have something that's outside of my personal feed, but that does keep me informed about, you know, local shows, but also like, you know, biennials and things like that, just bigger shows that one might not ever be able to go to, but two, it feeds the mind and keeps you informed, and that's really good. Anyways, that's just like a little thing people could do. Yeah. This book will make you think about a lot of different ways that curation, yes, hello, curation can affect you and your art and what you're affected by. And Did you ever have a show that was just, I mean, you talked about a couple, but that was just like so impactful in your life that you were like, I will never forget going to this art show? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, I think the Van Gogh Go Gone one
Mm-hmm.
was that for me, because I had never really seen that done. Like, usually, like, they'll have something like that and it'll just be pieces interspersed between each other, you know, and they'll be like, oh, they live together, and they may give you, you know, a couple paragraphs on the friendship that they had and a little bit about the living experience. But this was like 45 letters that were written, and it was, I don't think they could do it now because of the liability that was involved in getting those pieces in one spot at one time.
Yeah, you think?
Oh gosh, yeah. They had Starry Night there. Are you kidding me?
Wow.
I mean, they had Sunflowers, they had Starry Night, they had Gogon's the Bathing Women, or what it was, whatever that piece is that they always show for him.
Yeah.
They had that piece there.
Wow.
Like, they had some of the biggest pieces that these people made
Expensive.
there. And I was like, how did they do this? Like, they charged $15 to get just into this part of the show, into this part of the museum. It
Did
was
you say 50?
sectioned off 15.
Oh.
15. Just to get into this section. The rest of the museum, I believe, was free or like donation,
Wow.
you know, based. And this, they were like, it's $15 for a ticket. You got a time, you got a ticket, you could go through it. So yeah, they had to fund it outside of even what the museum had to be able to pay for it to do this.
Wow.
Yeah, like, to have those kind of pieces together, it's wild. It's so wild.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And I just kept saying, how did they do this? Like, who did what and who knows who to be able to get all these pieces? Because, like, think about it. Almost every one of those pieces has a different owner.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get all of them to agree to loan those pieces to the museum.
And then sure,
you have to explain to them, yeah, that not only will your piece be there, but other several high-profile pieces will be there as well, which means theft is at a height at that point. So that becomes a concern. And, like, yeah, it's just, it's nutty. Like, the Vermeer, so they had a Vermeer show, I think 2 months ago, if I remember right.
Where's this?
Is the only time, this was in, it wasn't in Reykjavik, I don't think.
It's okay if you don't remember.
I think it was in Amsterdam or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, it is the first time that they've gotten 36 out of the 40 known Vermeer pieces together in the same room at the same time.
Wow.
It was insane. They had 600,000 people go through that exhibit. They made a killing off of it.
That's amazing.
But the liability for it was bonkers. Like, if I was the curator, I wouldn't have been able to sleep till the exhibit was done.
Right.
I'd have just been like, pack them up and get them out of here now. As soon as it's done, get them out of here. I don't want to see them. I don't want the liability. Get it out of here. It's beautiful, but get it out of here. Yeah, like, to understand those pieces a piece are at least $2.2 million a piece. All of them. Because he only made 40 paintings. He didn't paint very long before he passed away. So that drives up the price of all of his paintings. And he's also considered one of the greatest painters of all time. Yes. You know? So, like,
it's wild.
It's insane. I would have loved to have gone to that. I was like, oh, I wish I was rich and I could get on a plane and go.
It is my dream to interview a curator for the podcast at some point. I'm like, this would be so cool, because this job sounds so intense
Oh, yeah.
and so complicated.
Oh, gosh,
and
yeah.
so organized, and it's a different kind of person. In this book, they're like, we don't believe that curators can become artists, but we do believe that artists can become curators. Or an artist curator, but not like fully to the point, because it's such a different kind of mindset.
Sure.
There's this one question in the book that it asks a couple of times, and I want to know your opinion. Do you think that curators can be creative within their job?
Yeah, within the context of who do I show together? Like, how do I choose the interplay between these two artists, and how do I create they're storytellers. They tell a story with the exhibit. So absolutely, they're just as creative as a writer. I mean, that's basically what writing is.
It's true.
They're storytelling. So yeah, it's not like, oh, we went in the back and we found a few pieces and we threw them out on the floor.
Yeah, it's easy.
Like, there's a narrative. Yeah. There's a narrative around all of that. So yeah, absolutely. I think they are creative inside of that pocket. To some extent. It gets kind of murky. I know that there's been a bunch of stuff that has happened recently where it's come down to, so the placards that are next to paintings usually have information about the painter, the time, and maybe a little blurb about the story behind the piece. And people have become increasingly critical about those placards. And they have to go through and change those placards all the time.
Oh, I bet.
Because somebody will phone the museum and say, hey, I'm a representative of the first world nations. You can't refer to us as this anymore. We don't recognize this. You need to change your placard. And it becomes this, there's heavy politicking and curation right now. Especially with the reappropriation of pieces back to their homelands, and to their origins. There is a bunch of political shuffling going on because, little known story, the CIA funded the abstract expressionist movement as part of a political move against the Soviet Socialist Republic in a show of power.
What?
So they funded them. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Was this in a book? Was this in Curating Art Now?
No, okay. It wasn't. But it's. I've watched some documentaries and stuff. Like, I've watched a documentary on abstract expressionism, and they talked to Robert Motherwell, and he talked about that a little bit.
Okay, you have to link this to me so I can share it with the people.
Yeah, I'll find it.
That's wild.
Yeah, so art has power. Because it was a show of our artists are better than your artists. That means our country is better than your country. And Russia didn't want to be shown up.
Yeah.
They viewed their art as, the highest form of expression and creativity. They were better human beings than somebody in the United States. And the CIA, paid them to basically be a lever in some of those situations to put pressure. It's wild.
This is
wild
story.
What people do with art. Money laundering. Money laundering happens with art all the time. Like, that's the majority of what the high art world is about, unfortunately, is money laundering.
We are definitely going to be reading books about, this CIA funding abstract art. I'm going to find a book about that. We're going to find a book about money laundering in art because that's exciting. Wild. And there was another one that I have forgotten about, but it's on the list. We're going to be reading a book about placards specifically in museums.
Okay.
That's going to be coming up in 2024. Wild. Last podcast for Art Book Club, I talked about how in a recent trip to Berlin, I was pretty impressed with how thorough the placards were on all of the art museums, and especially about origin and about whether or not it had been attempted to be returned, if it had been appropriated by the British Empire, basically, or
Right.
whatever scavengers they went out and took artifacts from, and also whether or not they're allowed to keep it, or if it's been on loan, or nobody wanted it, or they couldn't find the person. And with the amount, the thoroughness they had gone through each item in every single museum I went to in Berlin, I was like, oh, they're really trying to do the right thing here. And that felt very impressive. I haven't been to a museum in the United States since that trip. It was pretty recent, and I'm like, I'm going to be looking at these placards way differently.
Sure.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, I think Berlin's art museums are considered some of the best in the world right now.
They're so good.
So that doesn't surprise me. Germans are thorough. That's their thing. For lack of stereotyping people, they are. Like, they pride themselves in being great at what they do.
Regardless, having the job as curator means you do need to deal with these things now. And I think in this book, it talks about how the boom of the Black Lives Matter movement really escalated this. That was, already this problem. And how things have changed a lot. In this book, it also talks about the virtual tour of museums has become much more popular, especially when we were in lockdown with COVID. And that these tools were available for quite a while before the pandemic. But since then, how good these images that were being posted online had to be now, and how the tours were like a whole different ballpark of curation, and like the Met was just like it's so much. And it's an interesting read.
Yeah.
Do you have any quotes? Yeah.
Well, and I think in this, you asked me if I had any quotes. The thing that I highlighted was, the quote is that the star curator phenomenon is itself rooted in an almost exclusively European and North American history that makes little reference to the biennales of the global South, many of which establish forms of self-conscious critical regionalism working counter to the north-south flow of cultural influence. The concept of imperialism affecting art, and the fact of, the Elgin marbles, for instance. Yeah. Lord Elgin went and stole marbles from the Greek Colosseum. He stole them. They didn't belong to him. He walked in and said, I want those, and he took them. They ended up in the British Museum, and now the British Museum has to return them because they're like, he didn't own those. He didn't own those. It's not even your culture. Why do you have these? It's those kind of things that spark these conversations. Black Lives Matter. An instance I can think of that happened was a Basquiat show that was supposed to happen in Orlando that had 40 pieces that Basquiat did that nobody knew were around. Supposedly he did them on cardboard and sold them to this gentleman. Unfortunately for the museum, the gentleman was still alive and said that Basquiat had never sold him any of those pieces. Or he said that before he passed away. He said, I have no recollection of anything like this. They found out that these were all forgeries and that they were passed off as real. Multi-million-dollar pieces because it's Basquiat. But trying to fund a museum through piggybacking off of the popularity of Black art, of multicultural art, so that you can benefit financially off of it.
Finders keepers. Yikes.
That's disgusting to me. Yeah.
Wow.
Those are the things. Those are the things you have to deal with as a curator. And there are curators that aren't getting paid a whole lot. They talk about this a little bit towards the beginning of the book. They don't get paid much. Well, the director of the Louvre in Paris has been charged with selling artifacts for money. He sold $50 million worth of artifacts through the Louvre in Dubai. He lost his seat. It's actually a government elected seat, so people vote this person in. He had been there for 3 terms, so he was a long-standing
trusted member
person in the Louvre.
Yeah.
And they're going to try him. They're going to probably put him in jail. But these things are like, he's not the only one that has done this. They're finding tons of directors and curators that are doing this, that are lifting artifacts and selling them on the black market.
This is the tea for today. This is the tea for today's episode.
It's wild.
Okay,
you know.
Tell me your resources here. How are you hearing about all these stories?
Art Forum is a great place to learn about this. They're constantly talking about stuff that is in the news worldwide, not just in the United States, which is what I love about it. It's mainly European, to be quite honest. And so, yeah, you really get to start to see some of those nuances between what happens with all the players that are in the art world. The reason why there is a market for that stuff is because there are entitled, wealthy people that think that they can own whatever they want. They just have to pay for it. And when that happens, people take advantage of that, and we lose artifacts. Like, these are supposed to be public objects to help us learn about the history of humanity over time.
It just hurts
there
everyone.
Are things that we won't ever know. Yeah, we won't know because those things have been stolen, sold, and hidden. I mean, don't even get me started on the Geneva Freeport. The fact that there's so much art in that building. If that building burns to the ground, we are losing massive swaths of history.
It kind of feels like they're lost now.
Yeah. Absolutely, because people will never see them again. They're stowed away.
Yeah.
Until they are sold again, and they're moved to another room in the Freeport, essentially. Because that's all these people do, is they basically transfer their paintings from one room to the other. Like, they literally have art curation workshops built into these storage units. They're massive. They're hermetically sealed, climate controlled. Like, they have their own display galleries where if somebody wants to come see, they're private. They have a nice little room that you can come in. They'll hang the painting on the wall or the piece in the room, and you can come look at it, and then they'll put it back away. But there are no cameras. They don't know what goes in and comes out of there. That's why people store their stuff there. Because it is discreet. They never, quote unquote, take delivery of the piece, so they never have to pay taxes for it. That's part of the money laundering process of it as well. So it never goes on the books, so to speak. So yeah, it's wild.
The dangers of getting into topics like this is that you start to feel hopeless about the art world because nothing is good and nothing is pure. But it is simply the reality of it, especially when you get into, I'm going to say, levels of selling that are currently beyond you and I. And,
right.
And it just feels bad. It feels bad to hear stories like this, but it feels bad to be like, and, the people we trust, like a director of a major museum, and then they do things like that. It's like, oh, nothing can be trusted. And you're not going to see some of the greatest art pieces in the world in your lifetime, probably, because they will be stuck in a storage unit. And so it's cool. It's great. It's super. We love this. I don't have a point for you here, except that it just sucks, It sucks.
Yeah.
And if you do find a show that maybe has, 40 forged Basquiat paintings, and then you have to think about, okay, so who's responsible for this? Is the curator? Did they know that these were forged? How did they find these? Are they guilty of putting this together? Or were they just putting out the call for very fun Basquiat paintings, and they get approached like this and they're like, is it the curator's responsibility to know if something is forged or not? Like, is it the curator's responsibility to know if something is so authentic, and how do you avoid things like that if it's
Right.
finding pieces that are, real and still interesting?
Right.
And to what extent do we have to go through the knowledge of what's real and what's not, and try not to get fooled in the process? It's complicated. I don't think I would want this job.
Right.
This job of being a curator is so complex, and the payment is tiny, and you're trying to do something cool. Assumedly, you're assumedly trying to do something cool and put together a show of work that has a purpose and a story and interesting messages and tells people about work. I'm talking about in museums specifically, not in galleries. And also makes money for the museum itself, because these specialty exhibits are the main money bringers for these museums. I know that I only go to the Seattle Art Museum when they have a new special exhibit, but it's complex. It's complex, and knowing who to trust is interesting, and it feels bad that you have to when you go to a museum, you have to be like, okay, so how much of this can I trust? Like, you have to think like that. Most people don't when they go to a museum. Most people will go into a museum and think, I'm just going to go see some art, and it's going to be great and fun and interesting. But now you have to go into a museum and think, okay, who put on this exhibit, and is it good? Do I like the work? Okay, great. That's the easy part of thinking. But is it responsible? Is it economical? Is it good for the planet? They very briefly go into like the carbon footprint of museums in this book, like kind of towards the middle, and how like the Tate Modern was trying to reduce its carbon emissions by 10% by this year. I don't know if they've hit that or not. That'd be fun to look up. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it touches on so many different cultural hot topics for sure. Like provenance, like it's conjecture. Unless that person is standing in front of you, which most of them are dead, they can't tell you, yeah, that's mine. You have to take at somebody's word. Yeah, this piece was passed down from so-and-so to so-and-so. Here's the paperwork. Supposedly, this is the bill of sale, and it's legitimate. You can't totally hold a curator to that, because they can only do so much research. Like, they can vet it as far as they have the possibility of vetting it. If it comes around that it's a fake, I mean, there are people out there that are massively talented at making fakes. Like, I've watched some shows with people that are some of the best forgers in the world, and it's wild, some of the stuff that they do. And just having to deal with that alone, that would keep me up at night. Like, is this real? Like, or did we get duped? Did we get
duped? Are the people I'm hiring to help me with this job not great with bad actors? Is the director who's above me? Because a curator is not the highest person in the chain of command here in a museum. And like, is the director a bad actor? Are they good? And it's all about one person's motives. And this can go into any sort of industry here. This is definitely not just art museums here, but it's wild. I got a question here that says, what is the difference between a museum and a gallery? And I would say a gallery is usually privately owned, and museums are usually government funded, typically. Not entirely, but usually a good portion.
Galleries, art is for sale. museums are just to display art most of the time.
Yeah, that's also
they'll send you they'll sell you tchotchkes and stuff with like t-shirts and bags that have the paintings on them and stuff. But the museums aren't in the business of selling pieces, so to speak, unless they go to auction.
Unless they need to. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a new podcast I found that I must share as a recommendation, and mostly for Nomad here, but also for everyone who likes art. Let me pull it up because it's fascinating. Okay, it's called the Bare Facts Podcast, and they tend to interview big name artists or art industry people, like Jerry Saltz and art fairs and inside auctions, and they interviewed Bleeple. They have 5 episodes out now. It's pretty new. It's been fascinating. It's been interesting. All these people that they've been interviewing are really insider. I will have it linked in the show notes for y'all. But Bear is spelled Baer. Bear Evan Fax is Faxt. I don't love the spelling of these things, but here we are. It's fine. That's my dyslexia kicking in. I'm like, am I spelling facts wrong, or is this how they're spelling it? Classic. I feel like that's my recommendation for if y'all want more insider of like specifically secondary market and art museum and art fair podcast recommendations. Yeah, give it a listen.
Okay.
What else you got for me? You got any final thoughts on this book?
I think it opens a can of worms, you know. I think it spiders out into so many facets of the art world and why it is the way it is right now.
I think Lillian Cameron, who's the author, did a really good job in writing this essay. There's a lot of facts. There's a lot of names that you could look up individually from this book and learn more if a more specific topic interests you. Again, I found the first half of this book to be redundant because I knew most of these things, but I feel like if you are new to the art world and you're just trying to get any sort of grasp, it's quite educational. I am not finished with it, but I'll probably finish it tonight. I might even do an update here on the podcast about it. But so far I'm giving this a 3.5 out of 5. But that might change. What about you?
I give it a 4 out of 5. I really like this series. And I think, you and I have talked about this. There's like 7 or 8 books in this series. They're short. They're 125 pages a piece usually. But they're what's going on right now. It's not, this happened 20 years ago. And it's more of they just pose questions and let you think about it. Like that's the cool part. Like they give you tons of information and kind of let you grapple with what's going on, especially as an artist. Like I think the art world is one of the things that we constantly grapple with, because we're told to be altruistic with our intentions as an artist, keep it pure and, and when business touches it, it changes that. And it's like, well, no, business is just as much a part of art as it's ever been. And that is a romantic notion that society has pushed on artists that they are supposed to quote unquote live up to. And it's just not realistic. It's not. So it's like, okay, so how do I navigate this world? What do I have to contend with? And so these essays are great for kind of giving you a well-rounded perspective of what goes on in the art world. I'm excited to read more of them. But
me too.
Yeah.
I'm already committed. I'm we're going to read the entirety of this series probably in the next year or year and a half or so.
I'm glad I found it. I'm so glad I found it.
Yeah. I'm impressed with it. A new one just came out. So I'm like, they're keeping this series going. You can get these. I bought mine on Kindle, but I also saw them at the library now, which the first time I read when I read the first book of the series, They weren't at my library, so that's fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend. Very educational. If you were like, I kind of wish it was a podcast or like an audiobook, but yellow. If you're like, I want to learn about what's going on, I want to have a well-rounded education, I want something that's heavily researched and just to help me think or like discuss at a dinner party even, like this book would be something very fun to read because there's, again, like Nomad said, a lot of little topics too. It is a can of worms kind of book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, that's been Curating Art Now. Lily and Cameron. And are you ready for the next book?
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Hit me with it.
All right. This book, we're going back in time. We're going back about 70 years here, maybe 80 years. Here we go. We're going to read The Agony and the Ecstasy by Irving Stone. This book is a biography of Michelangelo. And it's good. It's very narratively written, so it's not gonna be like, and then this year Michelangelo did this thing. It's gonna be more like, and then he went out and he went into the night and he like dug up a body or something. There's gonna be some of that in this book.
Whoa.
I feel like that's the only spoiler I'm gonna give you, but also like it's kind of intense. This book is kind of long. It's 770 pages. But because we're reading this giant book, we have 2 months to read it because there's no book club in November.
Right.
This book reads really quickly. This is my second time I've chosen this book because it was one of my friend's favorite books ever, and I was just like, I think we gotta read about one of the great historics and learn about his life. So it's definitely a biographical novel. I think you're all gonna like it. And that's what we're reading.
Yeah. Be interesting. I don't know much about Michelangelo, to be quite honest.
His work is so famous. And I mean, we got David, we got all sorts of carvings and paintings and drawings, and like this was a smart guy. And his life is a little bit scandalous, and I love it. So it's going to be fun. We're going to hear about the Catholic Church probably quite a lot. We're going to hear about his personal life. We'll hear about how he learned to make art and about his death, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that's what we're reading, and that's what we're reading for book club. Jennifer, where can people find you here on the internet?
Well, you can first find me at Visual Nomad on Twitch. Mm-hmm. And I also have a Instagram account. It is Visual Nomad _, because somebody else has the other one and they haven't done anything with it for 8 years. And I'm kind of frustrated about that, but whatever. Yeah. And I also have my own website, visualnomad.art. You can go check out my stuff there and also listen to past podcasts on there as well.
Nice.
So
yeah.
Nomad
has the entire archive of Art Book Club up on our website. You can also find it on my website, which is stephaniescott.art. That's where you can find the entirety of the podcast, not just book club. And I am at stephaniescott.art over on Instagram. And here on Twitch, I'm Cheers Steph. Y'all, thanks for your live viewers for hanging out with us today. It's been pretty fun. If you're listening to the replay, give us a subscribe and a thumbs up. Help us find more artists because it's super nice. And it's been nice to meet you and talk about books. So reminder, no Art Book Club in November. We'll be meeting next on December. What is the day? Come on, little phone. I can remember. It will be meeting next December 10th at 3 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah. It's going to be great. All right. And that's all.
Sounds good.
Make good choices, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Toodaloo. See you later.
Elsa says bye.
Bye.